Yeah, I'm going to try and set the scene of where data and using real-time data can have an impact. So we've got three people. We've got Paddy, the project manager. We've got Tom, the site manager, and we've got Jason, the engineer. They're all tasked with the same objective: head down to Thomond Park for the rugby on the weekend. So with that, they're going to tackle it in three different ways. We've got Paddy. He's a project manager. He likes to plan everything out, work out which is the best course of action, how he's going to get there. So he's going to take the bus. He's worked out it's going to take him 2 buses to get down there. So morning of the event, jumps on the bus. First bus is late, so it gets there late. And then when he goes for his next connection, he misses that connection. And finally he gets down to the game and he's missed half the game. So for all his good plans, things have gone a little bit astray on the day. And then we've got Tom, our site manager. So he's action-focused, he's on the ground, he just gets things done. He's on the phone all the time. So morning of the event, he just jumps in his car, straight down. That's the way he's going down. Unfortunately, he gets onto the N7, big accident, gridlock there, he's not going anywhere. And there's no options left for him. So when he finally gets down, he's missed the game altogether. And finally, you have Jason, the engineer. He's kind of tech savvy. He wants to use real-time data. His tool of choice is Google Maps. So before the event, the day before, he checks Google Maps, says the bus is a good option to come down. So he has a plan to get the bus. Morning of the event, he checks Google Maps again. It sees that there's an accident on the M50. The bus is no longer the best option. It suggests a train. He gets the train down, and then he makes it just in time for the game. So you can see the impact of having live or real-time data in the right situation can greatly impact the success or outcome of an event or a project. So I just want to set that as a scene of what I'm going to be talking about. My background, I'm originally a civil engineer working in the construction industry for over 20 years. Originally from Sydney, but I've lived in Ireland now for over 20 years. And past 8 years I've been heavily focused on information modelling, BIM, and is now kind of into digital integrations and data. So a lot of what I do now is all evolving around data and how you can get a good data pipeline and integrate digital systems. And that's one of the things I've taken from the speakers today. There's lots of people where they're looking at their processes and how they layer on the technology to try and improve what they're doing. I currently work for a company called Gaggamiller Group, focused in around project management services in the construction sector. So we're heavily focused on the mission critical data centres around Europe, and large-scale construction projects, primarily working with clients, so client side, and looking at how they can improve how they manage their projects and taking a data-driven approach. So if we look, we're working in pharmaceutical, data centres, high-rise residential. We have a geospatial arm where they're looking at the 3D capture and that comparison, that model comparison. And then we also have a technology arm, which is the bit I'm part of. So we have software development, where we're developing our own in-house software, and also have data engineering solutions that we try and work with our clients to offer bespoke solutions. So a lot of the issues, we've seen this picture many times before, people are so involved with trying to get the job done and deliver the project, they don't really have time or even offer the time to be able to look at how they can optimise the process, optimise what they're doing to be able to do things better. So if we look at some of the challenges that we're facing, and I think this is probably across the board, lots of different challenges that there's a shared challenge of what we need to achieve. We're looking at lack of digital processes. This is starting to improve a lot in the construction industry. We're getting lots of options, but there is still a lack of digital processes. Previously it's been heavily manual, trying to capture what's happening on the sites. The lag and delay and accuracy of data is another big issue. I think that's one of the fundamental issues that people will find, that there's typically big or can be major lags between information that's bubbling up from the site down in the field, that comes up through the subcontractors and supply chains, makes it into the project management site team, and then up into the stakeholders. So sometimes there can be a 4 or 6 week delay as information's coming on, and then how the decision makers can react to that is really restricted with the delay. The sooner they can get the information, the more impact they can make on that. If we look at skills and processes, another challenge of having skill shortages in the workforce, especially when it comes to having construction and then having tech-savvy people that can leverage digital solutions easily with the team. Also, poor processes. This will be fundamental. I'll talk about this more as well, because any of the tech solutions that we try and implement, if you haven't got a good process or foundation of how you're going to work with that and having good people to be able to deliver it for you, you're going to find a major challenge trying to implement the digital solution. And also with data silos, so the various teams siloing the data that it's not accessible or shared or in a format that you can share between different teams. And we look at technology integrations. We've seen quite a few different technology solutions being offered up today, and it's trying to get that, which ones you can use and they kind of work together, rather than sometimes you can be trying to move from one solution to another or use 2 different solutions to solve 2 different problems, but you need to be able to use them collaboratively together, and that can be a major challenge when you're looking at file formats or data formats, or even the process required to manage those. And data interpretation. So once you get all this data, what does it mean? That's going to be a key. Do you have the domain knowledge or the understanding of the project or what the scenario is, that you can then leverage that data in a meaningful way to be able to present that to the project managers or the stakeholders, that they can then act on it. That's one of the key challenge of how you use that data. We're now invariably capturing lots of data on the sites in various formats, but on its own, it can be worthless if you've got to spend so much time trying to unpick it and see where the value is, or where there's relationships between one set of data and another, that you can then get insights of what's happening on your project. So, people, process, technology. It's a term that's been thrown around a lot, especially in the AEC and the BIM and information management community, but it is fundamental. Getting this right is key to being able to unlock your digital solutions. Understanding your people, who's involved, what they need, is fundamental to that. And then from there, you can work on your processes, develop processes that empowers the people, and there's a standardisation in around that there's a governance around information management, data management, and how that people can then follow a repeatable cycle, which I'm sure is important, like with the modular, getting that process right. I was very interested in that presentation earlier about that modular platform, and where they spent time getting down into that process during the slowdown during COVID, so that when they come out of it, then they've got tools and technology that they can layer on top. But without getting down into the weeds and understanding their process and really unlocking that, you're not going to really unlock the benefits of technology. So you use the technology layered on top of your people, your processes, to improve that. It's not the other way around. A lot of the time you see people or organisations trying to get the best software, and they think that is the key to their solution. That will unlock their problems. But then they start their journey spending lots of money and investment into training or trying to get this product up and running and off and working in the field. And then if they find out after 2 years it fails. I've heard that story many times, and they just say, oh, that's rubbish software. But if they got their processes right and knew exactly how they wanted to use and leverage that software, for their own benefits, for their own organisation, then they'd be able to get much better success. We then look into what it takes for effective project reporting. It's not just, a lot of times when we have clients approach us, they just go, okay, we want a project report. And they come with the end solution in mind. We just want a report that tells us what's happening on the project. But you really need to start back right from the beginning and look at what are the project goals and outcomes and objectives. What does good look like on a project? What does winning, what does success look like? Know what success looks like, and then you've got something to strive for. So once you've understood what success looks like, you can then start to find what your reporting requirements are. What information do you need? Who needs it? When do they need it? And how does that information going to flow? And the different metrics you can then leverage to be able to say what information or what metrics can we develop that can measure or be able to align with our project goals and objectives. That's the fundamental part of it, getting this part right. And that can be challenging, especially if you're more focused, what most people are pre-construction, they're trying to resolve their design issues and RFIs and getting started on the ground, the different enabling works that need to happen. And usually the team is a bit thin on the ground at the start, so trying to understand these key reporting requirements is essential. I think more so that the client side are getting more in tune with this and understanding what they need and how they need information to flow back to them. That's what I'm seeing more and more, is because they need to define the contracts of how these contracts are going to be initiated, and they needed to define what information they need and how they need it. So that needs to happen right at the beginning. Information management plan. So that's a big one, and I think with the whole BIM and ISO 19650, it really created a sort of a culture of understanding this information management plan. That was where my first exposure was to, I think back in 2015 when we were trying to put information management plans together, trying to get certification with ISO 19650. It is a struggle, but it forces you to think about, okay, what information do you need? How do you need it structured? Who needs it? And things like that, which are really fundamental to be able to then, so when you're in the thick of it and the project is churning and you've got thousands of bits of information, documents and data flowing around the place, there's a strategy there, there's a flow, there's a logic, and there's a process in place to capture that. Because if you think about it, once all that is happening live at the time, you're going to fall. So it's very challenging. So develop the management processes, like I said before, understanding the processes, developing process that you can then repeat, that you can develop standardization, and you have everyone doing the same kind of thing, which requires communication. Here on this one is now we can define our technology stack. Once we've got all these processes in place, we can look at, well, what software solutions make sense for us for this project, and how can they help us deliver our goals, not the other way around. So you let the processes and the people drive the technology. Communication, again, that the processes you put in place, it's a collaborative, fosters collaboration, because everyone's going to be working on this project together, and you want everyone to be able to be moving in the same direction and sharing information in the same way, that there's not double handling. That's one of the major things I see over and over again, of double handling of information, data, where the client will throw it to the design team throws it out to the GC. They're like in PDFs and trying to consume massive amounts of information. They're going to reprocess it, throw it down the line to your supply chain and your subcontractors, and everyone's reprocessing information, which is really inefficient. So here is about training, implementation, so everyone has an understanding of what their role is and how they fit into the process. And then automate data capture and your data pipeline. So that's the other key element. So when you're thinking about your software of choice, cloud-based software is always a better choice, a better solution that you can implement these solutions out in the field. People can use in tablets, and in the back end, you've got, like, that's one of the benefits of a lot of the AEC and the Autodesk products and the cloud products, they enable these really good data connections. So you don't need a software development team to unlock an API. You just go through Forge or the data connector, and straight away you can be pulling your data quite easily into Power BI and start working with it. So that's one of the major considerations you need to look at. And then you look at your reporting cycle, and the cycle continues again. That's why I've drawn this one as a loop. So once you then have good reporting coming through, you'll have better insights, better information, and that can better inform the process again. So you always got to look at that continual improvement loop. So moving on to what would be a typical enterprise kind of reporting process that we've implemented on previous jobs for previous clients, where we've got, like any project, you've got a whole suite of software solutions that you're using. Each team is using a different product for a different reason. And you don't want to hinder their team and say, you can't use that product because we're using this product, or everyone has to use the same product. That's never going to work. You always have to look at what's the best product for that process. And ideally, you've got products that can talk together, or that there's some sort of shared bit of information, or how you process the data can be shared, or there's some logic to that. So for a typical project, we've got Wayloader and Plan and Goal, which I'm going to do a bit of a demonstration of later, of a solution that is one of the products that the Gagmuller Technology Group have developed. We've got P6 for your scheduling, Aconex, or it could be Viewpoint, Procore, BIM 360 for your model management or form management on sites. SharePoint, Excel files, Word documents. So you've got loads of sources coming in. You could also have Costex and all your costing information and bill of quantities. So that's not even drawn on here. So then that moves into how do you pull that information in? And what we're doing usually is we're pulling loads of different file formats. Sometimes we've got an API connection, just come straight in. Sometimes we have to export data into a CSV or an Excel, but the point is if we can then get it into, say, SharePoint, we can start using Python or other things that we're pulling then into creating a data warehouse or like a SQL server. So we've got various levels of how we do this. Entry level, where we started with a few years ago, is we were just exporting Excels, getting Excels into data into Excels, and from there connecting it straight up into Power BI. So that's your first step. And then in Power BI, you can start working with that. The next step is you start trying to automate that process so you don't have to rely on people exporting Excels, and we can then use APIs to directly import into Power BI. And then we've got the development of the Power BI reports on Power BI desktop. The second part of this here, where we've got the tiers, I'm not sure whether everyone can see that, but essentially your top tier here is your executive reporting. So you've got to think about who's your audience, what's your reporting for, and what's the objective of that reporting. So here on your executive team, your high-level stakeholders, you've got high-level reporting. They might have some financials and some mixed with project performance, progressing on site, but it's high level. They don't want to see down into the weeds. They want to see general, okay, are we on target? Are we off target? And by how much? And what's our forecast moving forward? Next tier, we've got more of a senior management tier, which would be like your project management team or the department leads. So this is still high level information, but goes down into a little bit more weeds so that they could then action the information or can see where they need to focus their attention a little bit more. And finally, you've got down at the operations and contracting. Now that at this point, they're going right down into the weeds. They need to see, okay, we've got an issue in this room with that bit of equipment over there, so that they can then know where they need to go and what they need to fix. Whereas up here, they might just have an issue with, okay, we've got an issue, quality issues in a general area or in a general sort of category with mechanical plant. And then they then go down into the next level to be able to unlock that in detail. So it's just trying to customize the reporting process so you don't have one report that fits all. That's just not going to work. You have your different tiers of reporting. And with that, you also have security profiles of the different permissions of which teams are sharing information and what information is flowing through. So that's just kind of a sort of a high-level overview of a typical sort of enterprise solution. So Wayloader. So Wayloader is a product developed by Gagmuller Technology, and it's a project management tool. It's a location-based tool that allows for multi-projects to be managed. And it's a modular-based platform. So it's also got goal, which is essentially your high-level macro planning, and plan, which then goes down into micro-level sort of last planner style planning. So this is just one of the tools that we're utilising to get that flow of information. If I just come back, that here the key of this is that there's a continual flow of information, and that you don't have roadblocks where data is just, you can't get data out of a system, or you don't, there's not a way of getting it out, or it's inaccurate, or it's reliant on someone to export information, that you can have data flow from one side to the other. It's flowing through freely. So I'll just talk through. I've just got a short video. It's only going to be a minute long, just of these three modules. There's a few other modules. So it's geolocation, so you can have a map-based Google Maps kind of environment. Then you get into a site-level environment, and you can layer on different tools and different layers and different visuals. And then we've got the goal module, which is the macro-level planning, which would be typical to your P6. And then we've got plan, which is the last planner style solution. Into people. And then Wayloader Plus, which is then looking at 360 walkthroughs, drone overlays, and GIS overlays. And then also connecting to cameras. So I'll just talk through a typical scenario. So we've got our macro level plan, which all projects will have. They always, pre-construction, they spend a lot of time trying to plan out their P6 and their schedule, when things need to be done, what they need to do, and they use that to coordinate their project. That's required for every tender. You start the project and you have a good intention. Like Paddy, our project manager, he thought about what he needed to do. He had good intention of what he needed to do, but what he needs then throughout the course of the project is a good line of information of what's happening on the project, so he can make decisions to be able to change different choices to improve outcomes. So that if he needs to redo a sequence because there's a delay in one area or one room, he can act in a speedy way to make decisions. So a key challenge that is there when you're typically using P6 is you've got one person on the project who works with a project manager, the scheduler. He owns the schedule, and there's 10,000 line eyes on the schedule, and he's managing that schedule, and he's getting he might walk the site once a week if he's lucky, but he's getting feedback of when things are being updated, but there's a good bit of delay. It's only one person, so he's not going to know the granular detail of what's happening on site. He's only going to have a high-level macro detail, the information. And that's been updated. Typically, sometimes it's once a week, sometimes once a month. So the challenge here is that communication piece. How do you get information that's communicated, what's happening on the ground, back up the line to your project manager so that you can see how it's impacting your overall scheme? So the solution that we've offered is that you've got what we're calling hooks, and you'll have a task and a line item here. And what that scheduler does is he pushes that down to plan, and he pushes it into a board. So in plan, we go to the next slide. We've got boards, and each board, you'd have a mechanical board, you'll have electrical board, groundworks, concrete works. Each of your trade partners or your trade leads, they would own a board. So this is where you start get your engagement with their supply chain, your subcontractors. It's not just the GC or the whoever owns, it's not just his plan, it's a shared plan. And by doing it in a collaborative way, so they've got their board, their task is pushed down. So it might be a 3 or 4 week task, okay? Electrical first fix on the ground floor. So they've got a lot of work that needs to be done to make that task happen. So that task in itself is no good to the superintendent or that black hat who's leading his crew of electricians on the ground. He's got a general start time and general stop time. He's got to try and get everything done in that time. He then needs another tool to be able to plan his crews and things like that. So once it lands into plan, they then start on the last planner process where they're doing weekly and daily huddles on planning out where their crews are. He can then take ownership of that board, and what happens within that task is now it's his. He can own that and says, well, okay, I've got 4 crews doing different bits and pieces. He can break that 1 4-week task down into much shorter tasks that he can then assign several tasks to different crews. So he'll break it down. He might have 10 tasks broken up. He then has his 4 different crews that are on there, assign those subtasks to his sub-crews, and now you've got your leading hand who's out in the field, out in the site. He can pick it up on his mobile very easily and then go, okay, I've got this task, I've got to be over here. I'm doing containment in this first section. And he marks, okay, done. He starts it and then finishes the task. So that's where everything works nice and streamlined. The next crew moves in, they got to do their work, and then there's a roadblock, there's an issue. He goes out in the field and the concrete works hasn't been finished and there's still propping down the line where he needs to put containment and he can't do anything. So on his phone, he can just put in that there's a blocker. So he puts in, can't start these works because the back propping hasn't been removed. And he just presses publish and he walks off. He goes back to find what's his next task. But with that will then come into this task. His superintendent will see that. Then they can deal with it in their daily huddles and how they talk about. And not the benefit there now is then it can also pull through back up to plant goal. So you then see that communication piece that's come from the guy right down on the ground that there's a blockage here. Propping hasn't been dropped because I can't continue on with my containment, which is a very typical scenario that happens in a construction scene. And that happens hundreds and hundreds of times. Every day, every week, those little conversations are happening. And it's really being able to channel. Usually he just goes, I can't do this, and walks off. And then it might be a week later or something that they find out that there's a delay, or they could have pulled that propping down, they just forgot about it. So it's inadvertently held up or delayed the project where there was no need to. So that's one of the key pieces about that communication and collaboration. And then the other piece as part of it is that communication tool here, where it's a bit more of formal communication. So the story I spoke about before, that communication piece is about with the schedule, and they're interacting with the schedule and the task and the schedule, and then planning out their works and communicating back with the scheduler. Here is a communication tool where the different teams can be communicating. You can also, with geo map referencing from the phones, see where people are working. And the other part, now if we layer onto the Wayloader Plus, where we go into the Google Maps view, is now being able to integrate, which a lot of the other tools now, we're have the 360 camera capture, which is brilliant. Being able to see what's going on the projects in a timeline. So being able to, a place to store that. Software's not doing the 360 camera capture, but it's integrating with software that does it. Also drone overlays. So having where you're doing a lot of the projects we're working on, they do weekly drone surveys, and being able to capture that and have a timeline over that is very powerful, especially if you're in the civils stage of a project. Lots of work's going out in a big area. Obviously, when the building closes in, the drones become less valuable, and the 360 walkthroughs, it switches kind of priority of what becomes where the value is at. But it's just about having a tool that you can layer on that information onto your project. And then GIS surveys. So that's where Gabriel, the Geo, were doing a lot of ground surveys and surveying site that can be integrated and layered on. So it helps the different project management teams with their logistics, understanding what's going on the site. And finally, Sensor Connect work is integration with fixed cameras. This is where I was going to crack into a live demo and show the through, but we don't have. I can't do that here. So, but I was going to finish on some of the dashboarding. So all that is really, again, it's a tool to facilitate sort of streamlined communication, try and facilitate people's existing processes of the last planner system and their project management tools. So that was just a tool for digitizing that process, capturing that information, and then being able to stand up data on top of it. So here is a construction schedule which we've created for, it's a high-rise building, multi-level building, but being able to drill, so going from a 10,000 line construction schedule down into sort of actionable items where you can break it down floor by floor, package by package, and zone by zone is the key, and being able to see what's going on. So that's where sort of leveraging Power BI and tools like that and having a good pipeline of data coming out is really powerful, especially if that's then in the hands of the operation guys. So they're having daily meetings, and very quickly they can see where there's items going overdue, so they can hone in, click in, okay, we've got an issue over here in this area going overdue. And we've got a commercial dashboard. So the key here is in that piece about information management and having standardized data. So one of the key things I see a lot on projects is how they name packages and work activities. Everyone names it differently. You've got your construction or your project management team will name their work packages a certain way. Your commercial team will name the same packages completely different way. Your quality team and your design team, everyone is naming them differently. So it becomes very difficult to then share information in a scalable way, in an easy way. You can do it manually where you're manually picking it through, but that's not scalable at all. But to do it in a way that you've got a data pipeline that is flowing, you're getting real-time information, you need to have that lined up beforehand. So a simple thing of just naming packages the same across the board unlocks a lot of potential, but it's increasingly difficult. It's something that everyone has a challenge with. So here is, you've got commercial information, so very quickly you can see where, say, packages are going overdue. We've got a comparison down here between what's the construction progress compared to the payment progress, so they can ensure that they're not overpaying too soon. Okay, so if we look at what's the solution. So again, it's down to that people, process, technology. So process, streamline the process so it works in with your objectives, what you need to do, have it standardized so it can be repeated and so that people know what is expected in a repeatable fashion. Having good information management so that there's standardization of naming, like the ISO 19650 is a good example of where that has really started to open people's minds up and going, right, this is a good practice, it is done for a reason, and that has now become common. People understand if you name things in a logical way, everything just gets easier. You can share information easier. Standardization, that comes from your good information management. You've got standardized processes, standardized naming, standardized data structure. Even with software, I think software is getting much more, the developers are getting better at creating software that can communicate or can share information easily between the platforms. I think probably 10 or 20, like back in 2010, that was a major issue, especially with like Revit. even your versioning of Revit, whether you're using 2021 or 2022, could have been a challenge. Or if you're using CAD 3D or the different 3D modelling tools, there was challenges between which tool a company may use for their processes or manufacturing may be different for which the design team are using. And if you're trying to federate models, that's a real challenge. And then governance, so that once you put these good processes in place, there's a governance there that you're checking and correcting behaviours as it happens. Because if you just throw it out, you'll find things will just come off course. So you need that governance piece to be able to go, actually, no, you need to pull people back in line and keep the wheels on the track. People piece. Very important about, that's what I was saying, that it ties into that governance. You're setting it up for collaboration. So collaboration is the key. People are working together. You've got big projects and it takes hundreds of people to deliver these projects. So you really want them working in the same direction, all pulling in the same direction. Training, providing people with a training so they know what's expected. And that's a lot of, doesn't have to be formal training or in hoc training, that they understand what the process is, what's to be expected, and how they have the skills to be able to deliver what you need to be deliver. Good communication, engaging the entire team, so everyone's involved. Especially when you start getting into that last planner process, now you're engaging the subcontractor, you're providing him with a tool that can actually help him deliver his workload. So he's got invested interest to use it because he's going to use it for himself. And that invariably gives a better communication of what's happening on the ground with his teams and flowing up to the senior management so that we can make decisions to correct where there's constraints or things on the project. Monitoring behaviours as well, so that you can correct behaviours when they need to be realigned. And then technology. Digitise your process where possible, using cloud-based solutions. I think most software now has realised that that's really the driver. They need cloud-based solutions to be able to get the software in the hands of people on the ground, not just people sitting behind the desks and things like that. That it's a cloud-based solution that everyone can engage with, and that there's a feed of data and information. I think that's one of the things, like with that story with Google Maps it's amazing how it works. Everyone has a phone, everyone's using Google Maps, and then you're getting this live data feed, and it can tell when there's an accident or when you need to divert because something's happening in this area, which you would never have 10 or 20 years ago, you'd never have that foresight to go, actually, I'm going to take this direction, even though it's going to take me 5 minutes longer than it usually, because there's an accident down there. So having that. Trying to keep it simple. We're dealing with lots of complex things, but keeping it simple, looking back to go, okay, we're still trying to build something, or keeping back down to the fundamentals. Develop automated data. A data pipeline is also key to unlocking that real-time analytics. And that's where you get the real power of it, where people can see stuff. They know they're dealing with data that, even if it's a day old or whatever, you've got it fairly recent, you can make key decisions on stuff very quickly. So there's good products out there in the market now with there's the 360 camera captures, the different drone things that people are using remotely. They can very quickly see what's happening on the site, which is some great tools. So yeah, that's everything from me today. So I hope you've enjoyed that, found it interesting. Thanks, guys.